Hello, friends, and welcome to Sleep Tight Stories. Red and the gang cannot believe what they have found. The stone is a map? Where does it lead? They make plans to follow the coordinates on the weekend to see where it takes them. When Red gets home, she walks into the house and sees her father. Why is he here? The Transfer Student, Part 31. Red's father was never the silly type, the kind of dad who'd make funny faces or tell jokes. Maybe that's why she laughed in Mr. McCaskill's class, where the steady stream of dad jokes made other kids roll their eyes, but always made her giggle. It was just about the only good thing about going to English class. On Mars, her father had always been serious, and she doubted he even knew a single joke. His mind was often occupied with his work and the survival of their people. He was supportive, encouraging her and Blue in their studies, always telling them that knowledge was the most important tool they'd have in life. Red knew he cared deeply for them. He was kind and patient, always there if they needed him. But he wasn't the kind of father who'd go out to play sports or join in games like she'd seen so many dads here on Earth do. She remembered how he would spend hours explaining complex ideas to her. His brow furrowed in concentration, yet his tone gentle. Even when she didn't fully understand, he made her feel important. He had a quiet intensity, a deep sense of duty to Mars that he'd passed on to her and Blue. Though he rarely expressed his love openly, Red never doubted it. Now, seeing him standing in the kitchen in an AID uniform, she felt that same seriousness mixed with a strange unease. If possible, he looked even more serious than she remembered. Why was he here, in her kitchen? And when did he join the AID, those spooky people with their strange uniforms? Before asking these questions, she would have to get over the shock of seeing him. "Father, what are you doing?" Red didn't finish as she rushed forward, hugging him tightly. She didn't cry often, but she could feel the tears starting to flow. "I missed you too," her father said quietly, returning her hug. "Red, your father doesn't have much time," her mother said, gently interrupting. "Him being here risks breaking our cover story, and people may start asking questions we can't answer." Red stepped back, quickly wiping her eyes. Why couldn't they just be a normal family for once? She saw her friends on Earth with their parents and longed for a life that wasn't so secretive, so complicated. Her father's gaze softened. "I'm sorry, Red. I can't stay long, but there are things I need to explain, things I should have told you from the start. Your mother and I didn't want to burden you with all the details of the lottery and our people's move from Mars. We hoped you and Blue might just enjoy a new life here on Earth." "Where is Blue?" Red asked, realizing she wanted him to be here too. Blue should see their father. He's at a friend's house, her mother answered. He's been adapting really well to life here, and while he misses your father, we thought it best not to disrupt his adjustment. Seeing him might do more harm than good. But, Red began, unable to put her thoughts into words. Come sit down, her father said, his tone gentle but firm as he led her to the table. Red's mother brought over a cup of hot tea for each of them, her face lined with worry and urgency. Red took a deep breath, knowing that whatever came next might change everything she understood about her life on Earth. After taking a sip of tea, Red's father began. The odds of that box being found in your friend's backyard, here on Earth of all places, and of you uncovering Dr. Hart's secrets, it's almost beyond calculation. On Mars, I'd need a data pad to process those odds. He shook his head in disbelief. Normally, stumbling across something like that box would just be a quirky find, maybe just a fun mystery left by an eccentric scientist. And that's what you thought at first, right? That is, until you found the stone. If Alexa hadn't uncovered the stone's hidden function, it might have just ended there. But now, the path this will lead you all down, it's going to be problematic, Red. Not only for the Mars relocation program, but for your friends, too. They can't be allowed to discover the rest of what Dr. Hart hid. But why? Red pressed, her confusion clear. Why is this so important to you? And since when did you become one of those strange AID officers? He sighed, setting down his cup. To understand, you need to know more about the struggle on Mars. As you know, there are two main groups, those fighting to save Mars and those working on a way to leave. Your mother's a scientist with the Stay group, while I belong to the Leave group. So far, the Leave group's efforts have advanced more quickly. But even within our group, there are many branches, and one part of my work has been to find ways for us to integrate here on Earth, quietly, and without most people realizing we're here. We believed that Earth wasn't yet ready to accept the existence of Martians among them. This was the original purpose of the AID. So, what did Dr. Hart have to do with all this? When we first achieved the ability to travel here, an energy-intensive, dangerous process, we started forming alliances with select people in Earth's science community. We hoped they could help us prepare for our arrival. And, almost universally, they agreed to help. Dr. Hart, however, was different. She wasn't part of our original contacts, but somehow learned of our plans and insisted on helping. My team wasn't keen on involving her, but eventually, we agreed. She was persistent. Red's father leaned forward. At first, Dr. Hart was eager, maybe even too eager to assist us. She was smart, and her insights helped us better understand Earth's scientific landscape. But soon, her curiosity turned into something unpredictable. She became fascinated, almost obsessed, with the idea of Martians living on Earth. She wanted more than to simply help us integrate. She wanted to leave a legacy, a record for future generations. Despite our warnings, She insisted that Earth had a right to know about us someday. She was convinced that humanity could handle the truth, but we didn't share her optimism. We needed discretion, but she wanted transparency. That's when things started to go wrong. She began documenting everything in secret, leaving clues we didn't realize were there until much later. Some of these clues included technology, devices she stole from our labs that could reveal that we are here. Imagine what would happen if those were discovered. Red's heart pounded. The AID isn't going to do anything drastic to my friends, are they? I mean, they're not going to kidnap them or something. You wouldn't let them, right? She'd always suspected the AID had eyes everywhere, always watching. Her father shook his head. No, Red. The AID isn't here to harm them, and we're not as all-seeing as you think. I've been the one keeping an eye on you. Each time I returned to Earth, I checked in on you, Blue, and your mother. My colleagues, Ms. Misty and Mr. Shade, are in charge of your security, and while I often think they could adopt a gentler approach, they mean well and only want you to be safe. Red's mother interrupted gently, her voice tense. It's almost time. Red's father sighed, his face softening. I'm sorry, Red. I wish we could have more time to sit down and have a meal together, talk about your studies, and just be a family. But I need you to do something for me, and it's urgent. Can I count on you? Red nodded, though her stomach twisted with worry. She wasn't sure she'd like what he was about to ask. I need you to get the stone your friend Alexa has and replace it with this. He handed her a nearly identical stone. This one has a similar trick of turning translucent, but it's actually just a piece of glass that reacts to heat. Once you have the original stone, give it to your mother. She'll know what to do with it. But, Red stuttered. Red's mother stepped forward, urgency in her voice. It's time for you to go. Red's father rose, and before he could move, Red rushed forward, wrapping her arms around him tightly. Everything was happening too fast, and she wasn't ready to let go. I'm sorry, Red, he whispered, gently pulling away. Remember what I've always told you. Knowledge is the most important tool you'll ever have. Keep studying. And as quickly as he'd come, he was gone, slipping out the back door into the fading light. Red stood in the kitchen, clutching the false stone in her hand, her father's words echoing in her mind. She pinched herself to make sure this wasn't all just a dream. Her mother re-entered the kitchen, glancing briefly toward the door. Blue will be home soon. Dinner will be ready in a minute, she whispered, her voice subdued. Red realized how much she'd overlooked her mother's adjustment to Earth. She'd been so focused on her own struggles, her resentment of Earth, the endless mysteries, that she hadn't considered her mother might be struggling too. Her mother's usual cheerfulness seemed dimmed tonight, and Red could sense a quiet sadness beneath her words. Okay, Mom, Red replied. I just need to go to my room for a minute. I'll be right back. Red stood alone in the quiet of her bedroom. When Blue wasn't around, the whole house felt silent and still. She turned the stone over in her hand, feeling its cool, familiar texture. Her father had asked her to replace the real stone with this imitation, to end the mystery before it led her and her friends into something dangerous. But as her gaze shifted to the charm she'd kept hidden in her drawer, her resolve wavered. Her father hadn't mentioned it, didn't even know it existed. What other secrets did he not know? A part of her wanted to follow his instructions, to let this mystery fade as he'd requested. But another part, the part that still needed answers, wasn't ready to let go. He hadn't provided any real clarity, and though she knew he wanted to protect her, she couldn't shake the feeling that his explanations left her with even more questions than before. What exactly was the AID's purpose? And what had her father's role been in all of this? After a moment's thought, Red made her choice. She would swap the stones as her father had asked, returning the imitation to her friends. But before handing the real one over to her mother, she would use it to find out exactly where it led. The stone was a map, and if she followed it alone, she could satisfy her curiosity without involving her friends or risking their safety. She'd be following her father's request, but she'd also be keeping one foot firmly planted on her own path to the truth. She slipped the charm into her pocket, feeling its weight anchor her decision. Whatever secrets Dr. Hart had left behind and mysteries the stone might reveal, Red knew she'd be ready to face them on her own terms. "Hey, Stinky Head," Blue's voice carried up the stairs, breaking her concentration. "Mom says dinner's getting cold and I'm not waiting for you." Red rolled her eyes, stifling a smile. Some things never changed. She took a deep breath, the warm sense of vegetables and spices drifting up from the kitchen, making her stomach rumble. After the day's events, she realized just how hungry she was. "Ugh," she muttered with a grin, heading downstairs. First dinner, then she'd begin unraveling this mystery on her own. And that is the end of our story. Good night. Sleep tight.